All right, let's try. Hello and welcome to DSR's Words Matter. I'm David Rothkopf. I'm joined, as every week, by the great Oracle of Washington D.C., Norm Ornstein. How are you, Mr. Oracle, sir?
I'm pumped, David, because we just got the news that Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, is running for governor of Minnesota. And I'm sure he will take some lumps, just like his pillow.
Oh, oh, yeah. How's he gonna afford that? Isn't he like bankrupt? And
I have to believe that this is a scam, that this is a way to peel some money off from donations so that he can continue to live his lifestyle.
yeah, well, you know one thing, he doesn't spend a lot of money on books. It's not a big part of his life.
No,
So, Norm, speaking of genius, let me ask you a question. You remember the government shutdown?
vaguely.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it ended, and then these Democrats were like, "Okay, well, we've got a deal, and the deal is that they're going to vote on this ACA thing, and we'll really show who they are, and this is a big win for us." And so, tick tock, tick tock, nothing happens. Today in the Senate, they voted on ACA extension. It did not succeed. Apparently, next week in the House, they're going to vote on some health plan, although as of right now, there actually isn't a Republican health plan. But I just have this question, like, was this a big win? Did the Democrats win? Were they secret geniuses in setting this up, or not?
I don't think they had a very well established end game for this, David. But let's keep something else in mind, which is not only will these subsidies now very likely end as of the first of the year, and people who had gotten notices of,
3 weeks from the day we're recording this.
yeah, that people already are, I think, braced for this because they've gotten notices of their premiums. But the deal to keep the government open ends January 30th. So we may well see another shutdown coming in 4 weeks after this, 3 weeks. And then we'll see if there's any kind of an end game. But there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. There are 20 million people directly affected by this, 20 million of those families actually with healthcare plans, some of whom are going to be basically forced off of insurance. And if the Republicans succeed, something they will probably try to do with a reconciliation package that can pass with a simple majority in the Senate, where they will say to all of these people, great news, we've got really cheap plans for you. And that will be cheap plans that cover nothing serious and that include, once again, the kicker that if you have a pre existing condition, you're screwed. So the backlash, I think, will be fierce down the road if that happens. And if not, Republicans are going to be scrambling because the fact is, if a significant share of these 20 million lose their insurance, they're going to go to emergency rooms when there's any kind of a problem. And that means that hospitals across the country are going to be in big trouble, bigger trouble than they have been otherwise. It ripples through the entire healthcare system. And if there's a win here for Democrats, and I put that term in quotes, it is that at least it is now crystal clear who is denying them their coverage. And it is the Republicans.
But Norm, let's be honest. It's just you and me here, and maybe 2 million other dedicated fans of this show. Um, didn't everybody know that already? Haven't the Republicans been against healthcare for 10 years? Is it? Aren't the Republicans the ones that uh, uh, were against Obamacare at first, and then tried to repeal it 67 times, and then put this in this big ugly bill. And I mean, how many times do we have to say they're against it? I just
Um,
don't see how this is a big win,
yeah.
Norm.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting at.
Well, there will be have to be more times, but this is now almost 17 years since we've had the Affordable Care Act. When it was called Obamacare back in the day, it was unpopular. Once it became the Affordable Care Act, it became very popular. And people who discovered that not only could they get affordable insurance, not only were they in a situation where if they lost their jobs, and the only alternative was so-called COBRA plans, where you could keep your insurance by paying 105% of the premium instead of the 20% when it was employer subsidized, that they could actually get real insurance and not have to worry about bankruptcy or pre-existing conditions. Republicans opposed all of that. Republicans said we'll have a plan in 2 weeks. That was 2 weeks from never. And even now, what you have Mike Johnson, parenthetically, the worst speaker ever and a serial liar, saying we got all kinds of ideas. They still have nothing, nada, bupkis. Having said that, remember that we have a sizable swath of the population that pays no attention to much of anything. And so you have to hammer away at stuff where we would normally say, doesn't everybody know that? But there are lots of people who don't know anything. So at least we've hammered this a little bit. Is this a big win? No, it's not a big win. In fact, if they had agreed on a plan, and it may be, one of the things that could still happen here is that in the House, you have enough Republicans doing a discharge petition that would extend the subsidies for a couple of years, put some limits on the amounts so they're not going to the wealthier segment of the population, maybe throw in a couple of reforms, and that could get out and pass the House, and that would actually put more pressure on the Senate because it would be a bipartisan plan. So we're not dead yet. It is a Pyrrhic victory, you could say, so far, but it may turn out to be a little bit better. Having said that, I wish they had stuck to their guns a little bit further.
Yeah, well, he also, who knows what's going to happen because if they try another reconciliation bill, I hear all sorts of rumors about the other things they're going to throw into it,
Oh, yeah.
including, for example, permanent extension of a global minimum tariff of 10%. No, I'm not, I kid you
I
not.
know, I know.
Yeah.
It's like if you had said to Siri or Chat GPT, come up with a plan to destroy the American economy, they would have come up with something similar to what Trump is doing now
Well,
and his Republicans.
it also dawns on me listening to you talk that the word affordable in Affordable Care Act is a lot like the word affordability. That showed a lot of foresight 17 years ago when this was initially promulgated. And we're going into a year in which the only thing anybody's going to be talking about is affordability. And so if you kill the affordable healthcare for tens of millions of Americans, presumably that's off message.
You just haven't been listening, David. Didn't you see when Trump did his affordability rally at a casino that he said it's a hoax? Affordability is a hoax, and the economy is at A plus 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 plus. So this is a non-issue. Uh,
I
it's
think
laughable. No.
it is laughable. And, the reason he was sent up there was to say affordability was really an issue and we're on top of it. But he can't stick with the main message of the day for more than 5 seconds before he goes off on a tangent, attacks some reporter, starts talking about, Caroline Levitt's lips, which, I mean, oh my God, the stuff that comes out of this guy's mouth. Yeah, and what's an evergreen? But Donald Trump decides. I mean, the past week, Donald Trump wins the FIFA Peace Prize. Donald Trump hosts the Kennedy Center honors. Donald Trump says he's going to give himself the Kennedy Center honor. Donald Trump says he wants to name the Kennedy Center after himself. Donald Trump has band aids on this and that. Donald Trump's cankles are more swollen than ever. Donald Trump falls asleep in meetings. That, I mean, I don't even want to bring up the case of the previous president. It's so obvious that this guy is just coming apart at the seams. Do you have any Republican friends, Norm?
Many fewer than I used to have. But yes, I do.
Don't they, when they get into a private room, go, "Oh my God, how did we get stuck with this decaying loser?"
One of the most interesting things about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is becoming more interesting, even though she's still a right wing lunatic, was saying what others have said, except not so publicly, that they ridicule Trump behind his back. But having said that, the cult is still strong, David, and they're not going to go public with a lot of this stuff. And one good example of that is that the once sort of responsible Republican chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers, now says, after clearly having seen the video of these two stranded people on the boat that was blown up being taken out with the second strike, having seen that video, now says, I'm satisfied. I've talked to everybody. We don't need to release the video. This case is closed. This after lying about what Admiral Halsey said when he retired or resigned from his post. Now, what does that tell me? It tells me that despite the fact that Trump is deteriorating rapidly before our very eyes from a very low base, despite the fact that large numbers of Republicans are upset with him on the affordability issue, and a few of the preliminary speakers at this rally at the casino were complaining about prices before he said it's a hoax. Despite all of that, when the critical issues come up, when you ought to be getting some pushback, they all cave. And I'm not sure, even if he is basically left in a place where he is drooling and can barely articulate, even if now he articulates nonsense, there'll be a very substantial lag before they start to raise publicly their unease with him. That's the world we live in now, and it is a not a pretty picture.
Yeah, well, it does raise an interesting prospect because we are coming to the end of 2024, 25. What, I don't even know what year it is. We're coming to the end of 2025, 1 year into the second Trump administration, 1 year closer to Trump's departure, whenever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
Next year, I mean, you've lived through this a lot of times. Midterm elections eat Washington because these people start going home. And if they think they're in bigger trouble, they go home more.
Yeah.
And they campaign throughout the year. And less is that you can get less and less done. But if as they go home, prices are going up, or they're having trouble getting health care, or the VA isn't offering the services they used to offer, or the Department of Education isn't offering the services they used to offer, or whatever. Surely these people are going to come back to Washington and talk to each other on the phone and go, we got a problem. I just can't see how this year is not, that the year ahead is not increasingly difficult for Donald Trump each and every day.
I have no doubt that that will be the case, that where we are now in economic terms, I believe are far more likely to get worse and not better. Here's one reason why. We've talked about this before, but I think it's worth emphasizing. In the spring, the term of the chairman of the Fed expires, and Trump will replace him, Jay Powell, very, very likely with Kevin Hassett, my longtime colleague at the American Enterprise Institute and
So let me
current.
ask you a question. Is Kevin Hassett a person or is he a hand puppet?
uh, Either way, he's hollow.
Yeah.
Uh, but I personally, I always got along very well with Kevin. He was a very affable guy. You could go back decades and find a time when he actually did some reasonable economic research, which is why he was there in the first place. Now he's a joke. And I can't resist often tweeting, Siri, show me a clown masquerading as an economist. But of course, the fact is that Kevin's goal is to stay in the good graces of Donald Trump. And if he goes to the Fed, then he will do what Trump wants, which is to slash interest rates over and over. Here's the problem: what the Fed controls is one level of short term rates, the rates that banks use in their internal transactions and with transactions with other banks. They have no control over long term interest rates. The bond market, unlike the stock market, doesn't just react uh, irrationally, believing that great times are coming. It actually reacts to reality. And the reality, as we saw when gold hit $4,000 an ounce, is that increasingly external actors who invest in dollars are reluctant to do so. So, what do? Because we need revenue to pay off our deep debt. We have to raise the rates on long term treasuries to attract the money by people, in effect, buying dollars. What does that mean? Mortgage rates go up, even if short term rates go down. Car loan costs go up. The things that hit working Americans and everyday Americans will be worse off. And in the global economy, there's going to be a turn away from relying on the United States. So it's going to get worse, along with, of
Well,
course,
and
things
there,
like the
and
healthcare.
there's a practical consequence to that. Because if you lower interest rates, you lower demand for the dollar falls, imports become more expensive for
Yeah,
average Americans. So you get this Trump 1-2 punch of the cost of depreciating dollar and the cost of tariffs, increasing the prices that people have got to pay for everything. There's a long term consequence, which people will not be getting next year, but is worth noting. And that is people will increasingly be less reliant on the dollar as a reserve currency.
exactly.
As they become less reliant on the dollar as a reserve currency, it not only strengthens other currencies that will come into its place, like the Chinese renminbi, but also that's another reason why demand for the dollar will fall, and those long term rates will go up further. And
Exactly.
so it is a cycle of pain born of multiple terrible policies. You increase the deficit dramatically with the big beautiful bill that increases the deficit. You increase the price of goods with these tariffs, and then you force the Fed to lower interest rates at the same time. It is a perfect storm.
And what we know is that when you look at countries, Argentina being the prime example, that basically destroy the independence of their Federal Reserve, inflation skyrockets. So we get probably stagflation back for the first time, really, in decades. And the danger here, frankly, besides the economic turmoil and the pain that it will bring with it, is as Trump gets backlash, as it weakens, as we end up with this kind of turmoil, he is not likely to say, oops, we need a different set of policies. He's not likely to do, for example, what Jimmy Carter did, which is to say, we've got to cure this inflation spiral. It's going to hurt a lot. Paul Volcker, you take over and do what you think is the right thing to do, which was a lot of pain that ultimately paid off, even though it hurt Carter. You're not going to see Trump do those things. He's going to send more troops into cities. He's going to deport more people violently. He is going to create more foreign adventures and wars. He's going to kill more people on the seas, and he is likely to invoke martial law when things get really tough. So we could end up in a world of hurt that he has caused on every front. And that's what we get for electing this monster, who also, of course, is intent on destroying our allies in NATO and blowing up alliances that have kept the world prosperous and safe by and large for many decades.
But it's worse than that, Norm.
Thank God you're the one to say it, David.
but it's worse than that, Norm, because if all those things happen next year, there are going to be new pressures within markets that could, in fact, produce the the AI sell-off that everybody's talking
Yeah.
about. It could produce the stock market downturn, and on top of that, there are all sorts of little factors that could become big factors. Nobody's paying attention, but I saw a disgusting picture in the Washington Post or someplace of a guy with measles, and
Yeah.
he had a bad case of measles. And there's an outbreak, I think it's South Carolina, of measles.
Yeah.
People are not getting vaccines. The combination of people not getting vaccines and then kicking 20 million people off of healthcare is not going to be good for the public health of the United States. Could there be, another pandemic? Could there be another kind of health crisis in the midst of all this other stuff? Yes. How is all this going to affect Trump's ridiculous and ill-conceived forays into crypto, including having the United States have the largest crypto reserves of any country in the world? What is the value of all of that?
Bupkis.
Bupkis. It was bupkis to begin with.
Yeah.
But people are going to discover it. Like you probably went and bought a lot of the Melania Trump meme coin, and which has lost 90% of its value in the past couple of weeks. I'm very sorry. That but
Yeah,
I know
but
you have a lot of faith in the First Lady.
hey, at least I have my supply of those Trump gold sneakers that were
Well,
$499 when you could get the same pair on Temu for $499. So
only I love the fact. No, most people don't know this about you, Norm, but I know that you do know Temu in a way most Americans don't know Temu. That you are a bargain hunter extraordinaire.
I will say this watch band, which is magnetic and very nice on my Apple Watch, which was $1.97, came from Temu.
All I can tell you who are listening, the story Norm will show up in like a Rolls Royce and a top hat and tails, and explain how he got the whole thing for $1.25.
Now, let's not go too far with these stereotypes.
Well, no, you have it in common with
Yeah,
my wife. So
I could actually give you a story about how I dressed like a billionaire for very little money by buying Willie Brown's former wardrobe from the Goodwill of San Francisco store. And the best dressed man in America, Keaton and Brioni suits, for which I paid a pittance.
And you still wear them?
I do with some. The problem, this is a great tragedy, David, but a closet full of these suits that now retail for like $12,000 or $15,000. And then COVID came and I didn't wear any for 2.5 years. And then when I went to the closet, more than half had been destroyed by closet moths.
Oh,
So it was extremely painful.
I got to tell you, I got to sit you down with my wife, who also is, a Timu and online aficionado and a absolutely dedicated thrifter. Her enemy in the world. If I said to her, if I woke her up in the middle of the night and I said, "What scares you the most? Who is the biggest enemy in the world?" She would say moths. She hates the moths, Norm.
Yeah. Well, I had a couple of experiences where I would go to, when I had to wear a suit, I would go into the closet after all of this, find a jacket that was perfect, and think, okay, thank God I've got something. Then I'd put on the pants, and there was nothing left in the crotch area. So
of
uh,
of the
I couldn't go
pants.
outside that way, unfortunately.
And we're not going to digress too
No,
much
no,
longer,
no.
but a little longer. But a little longer. Isn't it true that at one point you thrifted a suit of some other notable billionaire, and then you
Yes.
run into him at a party, and it's got his initials in it or something?
So Jim Kimsey, may his memory be a blessing, one of the founders of AOL and a billionaire, gruff former Marine, but I liked the guy. I knew him a bit. And I bought a Brioni jacket at a store on eBay for, I think it may have been like $150. Beautiful, pristine Brioni jacket. It arrives in the mail, and I look inside, and the name James V. Kimsey is embroidered inside. And I thought that was very funny. Then at a gridiron dinner, I happened to see Jim Kimsey across the room. And I went over with my wife, who kept saying, "Don't do it, don't do it." So, of course, I did it. And I said, "Jim, I've got a funny story to tell you," which he did not find funny at all, because he assumed that I was saying that this billionaire was trying to make a little money by selling off his wardrobe. When I know what happened is he gave a bunch of stuff to charity. The charity saw a Brioni jacket and sold it to a third party, because knowing that at the Goodwill store they weren't likely to do well with Brioni jackets. Uh, but it didn't matter. It was a very funny encounter.
See, folks, look, we bring you a lot of insights, and as we say, we're not just going to tell you that the economy is going to tank next year. We're going to help you figure out how to deal with it.
We're going
So
to make you laugh all the way into the fires of hell.
that's right. And every week, Norm will say, "And here's the bargain of the week, folks:
Yeah.
Brioni jackets for $1.50." All right. Well, we have a little time left. Let me ask you another question about something that I thought was just so Trumpian and so disastrous for the United States. I was having a lunch just now with our team, and
Yeah.
I said I think I'd like to launch a podcast called MAGApocalypse Now, uh, because I think every week you could do some disaster story like this. Here's the one that really sent me over the edge this week, and there's so many to choose from. The State Department, which of course, as you know, is also busy banning the use of Calibri type because it
Yeah.
is too woke, and the Secretary of State has actually devoted some attention to needing everything in Times New Roman 14.5, which is a little large, I think, but
Mhm.
it's excessive. That's government waste. But in addition to this, they announced that they are going to require that visitors to the United States make available 5 years of their social um, media activity to be reviewed by the US government before they're allowed into this country. 5 years. First of all, I don't know how you do that, right? I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
But secondly, this is, I mean, they don't do this in Russia. They don't do this in Iran. They don't do this in Viktor Orban's Hungary. And just to sort of stick a thumb in the eye of the United States, almost the very same day this was announced, the Chinese announced they're extending for another year their program which allows you to go to China for up to 10 days without a visa. You could just hop on a plane
Yeah.
right now and go to China for 10 days. And they are now extending that. So in the United States, God forbid you tweeted something bad about Trump 4.5 years ago, you may not be able to come here. This seems to me, tourism revenues are down like $30 billion already because of a lot of the craziness that's going on. This is going to be a killer, particularly in the year before the World Cup and so forth.
So there are two things here. First, I want to go back to your MAGApocalypse Now, MAGApocalypse Now, because it just made me think of the famous line from Apocalypse Now. I love the smell of
Smell,
napalm. So this would be, I love the smell of Trump's tanning oil.
yeah,
Uh,
I've,
uh, on that issue, we know that a number of Europeans have already, who are coming to the United States, been denied entry because they had said something negative about Trump on social media or in another venue, which is outrageous. This makes it far worse. In Florida, a large share of the tourism is from Europeans. The English, in particular, have loved to come to Florida in the wintertime.
it doesn't reflect well on them, but go on.
No, it doesn't. Although they want to escape the dank, damp winters that they have. Who's going to come? Why would anybody who put together a sizable sum of money to come to the World Cup, which means not just paying a lot for airfare, but getting hotels, which will have their prices raised as the World Cup meetings or games take place in these areas, risk it under those circumstances. So we're going to see a drop in revenue that comes from foreign tourists that will affect hotels, restaurants, and other venues that rely on that kind of tourism. National parks are going to be hurt as well. It's insane, but it's a reflection of the kind of narcissistic, sociopathic lunacy that governs so much of the policies of this narcissistic, psychopathic president.
I used to know a guy who, when I would say things like that, would say, "But tell me what you really think."
You know, sometimes you have to pull your
Yeah,
punches
pull your punches.
to be prudent.
But well, you do. You kind of do. Um, in the same way that a performer tries to make sure that they can always go a step higher as they get closer to their big finale, and we just know that every day some new craziness is going to come up. I mean, I didn't even mention that for $1 million you could get a Trump gold card and
Yeah.
become get on the fast track to citizenship.
It's and that the only ones he's letting in are whites from South Africa, while he calls vast swaths of population, not just the Somalis, garbage, and admitted that he had lied for years about calling countries like that shithole countries. So there you go.
Well, there you do go.
Yeah.
Well, look, the one thing is, and people love you out there, and there's so many people who listen to this podcast, and they say, "I really love Norm," which I have to say, what am I, chopped liver? But okay, they love you, and they come back week after week, and those people go to bed at night and they say, "Well, what if everything becomes good in America? Where will Norm go? What will happen?" And I don't think there's any risk that that's going to happen anytime soon.
We will go back to stand-up comedy. What else? Before we go, I just want to reflect on one thing.
Yes, sir.
Slightly different, but it flows from the vitriolic ways in which we handled the world we live in. I went to a session at the National Cathedral the other night with two governors, Spencer Cox of Utah and Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. A panel before that with my former colleague Yuval Levin, the Heather Gerken, the president of the Ford Foundation now, having been dean of the Yale Law School, uh, and Melody Barnes, and they all talked about the need for civil discourse and disagreeing better. And I'm on board with that. The debate camp that we do, the debate program, is all about teaching how you have to debate vigorously, but you need to maintain a veneer of civility. But Spencer, who I like a lot in many ways, said, talked about loving your neighbor and all about how you can't treat them as the enemy. And that's true up to a point. But when you're dealing with somebody who lies repeatedly, who justifies murder, who is engaged in murder, like Marco Rubio, 600,000 people, innocent people dead, 400,000 children, because of how he eagerly jumped on the bandwagon to blow up AID when he was put in charge of it. Uh, Whether you decide that they're still human beings and what you should be doing is debating their policies, there comes a point where you have to admit that saying love your enemies, which would be a little bit like saying let's love MBS even though he dismembered Khashoggi, and let's love Vladimir Putin even though every day he is deliberately targeting women, children, and civilians and infrastructure. And we could go on and on about that. We need to strike a balance here. It's one thing to go after somebody more civilly who just has different policy views than yours. But in this broadcast, in this podcast, we also go after evil people. There are evil people in this world, and they need to be called out. So that's my sandbox.
I totally agree with you. One of the things that drives me craziest is when people say, I don't want to be judgmental. And it's like, so you want to stop being a human being?
Yeah.
The only thing we can do as people is make judgments. It's how we survive on the planet Earth.
Yep.
It's how we pick our friends. It's how we pick what we do. And so you have to have judgment. And sometimes the judgment is negative about other people. And you have to say it because, normalizing, giving people a pass is part of what got us to where we are right now. And so I totally agree with you. It's why we try to speak truth to power, as they say, and not pull punches that shouldn't be pulled. And you're an expert at it, Norm. Expert. And it is a good thing for all of us.
You do a pretty good job yourself, David.
Well, I'm just here to coax you along. In any event, we will be back next week with more of this Christmas spirit. It'll actually be the middle of Hanukkah for those of you who celebrate. It starts on Sunday, and we will share our thoughts on whatever happens between now and then. For now, thanks, Norm. Thanks, everybody. And if you like this and you're watching on YouTube, subscribe because our number of subscribers is going way up. And if you like it and you want to support what we're doing, go to the dsrnetwork.com, click on membership, and for a few bucks a month, you can support people who have judgments, people who are willing to tell you what they think because they think it's important to be honest in times like these. People like Norm. So if you like that, please go subscribe. Until the next time, thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.